it over to our chair.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Dental Assisting Council meeting. My name is Kara Miyasaki, and I am the chair of the Dental Assisting Council. Today is Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. This is an official meeting of the Dental Assisting Council. The council welcomes public comments on any item on the agenda, and it is the council's intent to ask for public comments prior to the council taking action on any agenda item. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular agenda item, a total time limit may be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic and not repeat testimony already provided. If you agree with testimony already provided, please just state your name and that you are in support of any comments previously provided. If a time limit is determined to be necessary, please keep your comments within that time limit. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask for board staff to call the roll.
Good morning. My name is Morella Turan. I will now call the roll. Epps Robbins,
Epps Robin, present.
Fowler,
Fowler present.
Miyasaki,
Miyasaki present.
Olagi,
Olagi here.
Pacheco.
Pacheco present.
A quorum has been established.
Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 2, public comment on items not on the agenda. Before we open public comment on matters not on the agenda, I would like to remind everyone that public comments should address the council as a whole and not individual members. Please be aware that public comment during the agenda item should provide information to the council members, but it is not a discussion between the council members and the public. The only action council members can take right now is to listen to comments and decide whether they want a future agenda item on the topic. Though this may seem at times like the council members are not being responsive, following these guidelines is critical to ensure the rules of the Open Meeting Act are followed to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the council's mission. In the interest of time, as we have done in the past, we would like to request that public comments not repeat statements made by a prior commentor. If you are in support of a statement made by a prior individual and your comments have already been made, please just state your name or association and your support for the previous commenter. Legislative hearings regularly use this practice as it is a good way to ensure that we can hear from everyone today. Are there any public comments? Seeing that there are no public comments, we will now move on to agenda item 3, discussion on possible action on November 8th, 2023 meeting minutes. Is there any council member discussion? For Miyasaki, I just have a correction to the minutes on page 5 of the meeting materials on the top for the first paragraph. It starts out with the paragraph Vice Chair Miyasaki voiced, and it goes to targeted toward the California Dental Association exam, and if that can be corrected to the Certified Dental Assistant exam. And that's on line 3. And I believe the part that says, it's written are at times better than the others, directly follows that. I believe that should be substituted for very in-depth and detail. So are at times better than the others should be changed to very in-depth and detail. Are there any other council member discussion?
Executive Officer Montez, I do want to clarify that we will need to review the webcast to ensure and confirm the wording to make that change. We can still move forward with the motion, but it does need to reflect that we will be confirming with the webcast.
I'd like to make a motion to confirm the minutes and after they are confirmed with any edits or change with the edits as the webcast is reviewed.
Pacheco, second.
Miyazaki, motion, Pacheco, second. Are there any public comments? Seeing that there's no public comments, thank you, board staff. Please call the roll and record votes for this agenda item.
This is Morella Teran. I will now call the roll. Epps Robbins.
Epps Robbins, aye.
Fowler.
Fowler, aye.
Miyazaki.
Miyazaki, aye.
Olagi.
Olagi, yes.
Pacheco.
Pacheco, aye.
The motion passed.
Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 4, Executive Officer Report. I'm going to ask Tracy Montez, Executive Officer, to present this agenda item.
Good morning again, Tracy Montez, Executive Officer. I just have a very brief report, and that is that we have been working very hard on our Sunset Bill legislation, as well as responding to various bills. This is a very busy time of season for the board. And so in addition to getting ready for the May board meeting, we've been working on that. Other than that, I really have no other significant updates, so thank you. Happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Is there any council member discussion? Seeing that there's no discussion, are there any public comments? Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 5, update on dental assisting examination statistics. I'm going to ask Ricky Parks, Dental Assisting Unit Manager, to present this agenda item.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, Chair Miyazaki and members of the council. My name is Ricky Parks. I am the Dental Assisting Program Manager, and the board currently offers 4 written examinations: the Registered Dental Assistant General and Law and Ethics, the Registered Dental Assistant in Extended Functions, the Orthodontic Assistant Permit Written Exam, and the Dental Sedation Assistant Permit Written Exam. The table that begins on page 16 of your meeting materials includes candidates who attempted dental assisting examinations this fiscal year and the past 3 fiscal years. Please note that due to the cancellation of the February 8, 2024 Dental Assistant Council meeting, the board staff received a request from stakeholders to provide the statistical reports that would have been presented at the meeting. On February 28th, 2024, board staff posted this information on its website under the News and Alerts section and distributed an email notification via board's listserv. There is no action requested on this item, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Is there any council member discussion? Seeing none, are there any public comments? Thank you, Ms. Parks. We will now move on to agenda item 6, update on dental assisting licensing statistics. I'm going to ask Ms. Parks to present this agenda item.
Receive and approve to test. Starting on page 20, you will find statistics on license applications that were abandoned prior to being made eligible to test, and the number of applicants who completed the process and were issued a license. On page 21, you will find statistics on applicants who were denied licensure and the number of applications that were abandoned after becoming eligible to test. And on pages 26 through 29 are statistics on population of current and active registered dental assistants by county and RDA's to dentist ratios. Again, please note that due to the cancellation of the February 8th, 2024 Dental Assistant Council meeting, these statistics that would have been presented at that meeting were posted on the Dental Board's website. This concludes agenda item 6. There is no action request on this item, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Is there any council member discussion?
Again, Tracy Montez, I want to clarify that these tables that show the ratio of practitioners to the population are merely that, okay? It is data that we are able to access and provide. It does not mean that this is the number of professionals practicing in a county. It only means that this is their address of record. So an individual may have an address of record in a county, however, they may practice in multiple counties. And I'm clarifying this because this came up during our sunset hearing in terms of access to care. And there was concern that some counties did not have licensees or that there were very few. So again, I want to clarify that this is just merely data of address of record of our professionals in a county. It does not indicate where they are practicing. Thank you.
Is there any council member discussion? Are there any public comments?
Sherry Becker, representing Sherry Becker. I have a question on page 19, and it's the dental assistant applications received by month for the RDA for 23-24, and I see that that's the 1957, but then below that, when it says dental assistant applications approved for 23-24, the number is higher, and I just wanted some clarification on where that, where the deviation came from, please. Thank you.
Certainly, I can answer that question. So just to clarify that you want to know the difference between received and approved?
Correct.
Okay, so applications that are received go through a review process, and if complete, they are approved to test. Once the applicant is made eligible to test, they become a candidate, and then once they pass the exam, they are issued the license, so then it's approved. So there's a few phases in the process, and the applications received are the initial application. So the 1010 is the initial application prior to being approved to test. The application, the 1010 approved by month, are those who applied and were made eligible to test. So the applicant has 1 year to fulfill any deficiencies, and it can fluctuate, the numbers can fluctuate based upon a complete application. So they're not always going to match, the numbers are not always going to match.
So in summary, the applications that come in may have deficiencies, and so that's why you're going to see a difference in numbers, because there are several steps that they have to go through, and so you're always going to have sort of this fluid changing of numbers. Applications come in, depending upon deficiencies, they may get addressed in that quarter, or they may not, and so that's why there's a difference in coming in, and yes, thank you.
Are there any more public comments? Seeing that there's none, thank you, Ms. Parks. We will now move on to agenda item number 7, update on registered dental assistant in extended functions, educational programs, and courses application approvals. I'm going to ask Victor Libet, licensed and program compliant.
My name is Victor Libet.
Sorry.
No, you're not on. So turn, touch that plus.
Just one moment, Victor, please.
Please, on your team screen.
I'm going to ask Victor Libet, licensed and program compliance unit manager, to present this agenda item.
Whenever you're ready, Victor.
Thank you, Chair Miyazaki. Thank you, David. My name is Victor Libet. I'm the manager of the new License and Program Compliance Unit, which is responsible for approvals of dental assisting educational programs and courses. I'll be presenting agenda item 7, which begins on page 30 of your meeting materials. This memo provides statistics on applications for board approval of dental assistant educational programs and courses. These include applications for board approval of RDA programs, RDAF programs, and RDF programs that include interim therapeutic restorations, approval of dental sedation assistant, DSA, and orthodontic assistant OA permit courses, and approval of radiation safety, coronal polishing, Pitt and Fisher sealant, ultrasonic scaling, and infection control courses. Again, please note that because the February 8th, 2024 DAC meeting was canceled, stakeholders requested that the board staff provide the statistical reports that would have been presented at that meeting. On February 24th, 2024, the board posted this information on its website under the News and Alert section and distributed the email notification via the board's listserv. There is no action requested on this item, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Is there any council member discussion? Are there any public comments? See,
Tracy Montez, again, I would just like to acknowledge Victor. This is our new license and program compliance unit. We have 2 of the 3 staff. We hope to be adding the final staff person for this new unit, but they have been working extremely hard to get caught up on pending program and course approvals. They've done a site visit as explained, and they're doing a fabulous job. So I just wanted to acknowledge them. Thank you.
thank you. Is there any other council member discussion? Are there any public comments? Seeing that there are none, thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 8, update from the board's Access to Care Committee. I will ask Lilia Ladin, Board Secretary, to present this agenda item.
Good morning. How are you today? I'm Dr. Lilia Larin, Board Secretary and Access to Care Chair, and I'm going to be presenting a follow-up on the Access to Care Committee. In November, this is a follow-up of the November 8th meeting that we had. Last year, we reported to you that the Access to Care Committee was going to work on issues of the workforce. Those are the issues that we could probably solve a little bit easier than going out there into the community and building clinics or whatever, but we can't do that, no way. But we do want to work on the workforce issues. And we had 4 recommendations last year and that were approved by the board. They're action items. And since then, the dental board has been working with the Consumer Affairs Office, OPES, to address the recommendations. The first recommendation was to explore exam transparency for RDAs. Since then, staff has reviewed candidate information bulletin to ensure better understanding and use of the bulletin. To address this recommendation, a new examination plan for RDAs went into effect on May 1st. The candidate information survey and new examination plan can also be found on the Dental Board website. I'm going to skip recommendation 2 for a minute here, but I'll go to the third recommendation, which we had, was to survey candidates during the RDA exam and determine how candidates are studying for the examinations while trying to find out why they are failing. To address this particular recommendation, the staff developed with OPES 4 questions that will be added to the PSI computer-based exam for RDAs in order to collect back data and feedback. The 4 questions are: how did you prepare for the exam? This will be at the end of the exam. How much time did you spend preparing for the exams? The second question. How much time passed before you scheduled exam after being approved to take it? And do you feel the steps you took to take exam help prepare you sufficiently? These all have multiple choice answers, and you can see them in your meeting materials. You can read those there. I skipped number 2 because the second recommendation, because staff is still working on that, and that addresses the impact of the exam on candidates that have English as a second language. So that we're probably going to solve that recommendation by adding another survey question that asks the candidate if they need more time to finish the exam if English is their second language. That's the way I think we're going to be able to solve that question, that recommendation. And the final recommendation, the 4th recommendation we had, was to analyze the pathways for licensure. Now, Dr. Tracy Montes will be addressing that issue for us.
Thank you very much. So again, there were some requests for information by the council and the board to look at how the pathways may differ in terms of pass rates. And so we had OPS, the Office of Professional Examination Services, run some analyses, and we have in your packet the memo provided by OPS, and it shows the pass rates in the first table. We have the education pathway, the on-the-job, which is the work experience, and then we call the combined pathway. And so you can see what the overall pass rates are. The first time pass rates, those are individuals that are taking the exam for the first time, and then the repeat eventual pass rate, those that have to take it more than once to pass. Then we also, and you can see intuitively, and this is how it's been consistently, even I've been working with this board in various capacities through OPS, and the trend is the same. Our education pathway typically has a slightly higher pass rate, again, followed by the on-the-job and then the combination pathway. Sometimes those flip-flop in terms of the pass rates. And why we see that is a lot of times because, again, our education pathway, as I've shared many, many times, is sort of a general preparation for the test. You know, you're preparing for the profession, and when you're in an education pathway, you're prepared across all of the components or pieces of that profession. On-the-job training, so you end up graduating with, again, a very general or broad knowledge base. On-the-job pathway, you typically are focused more in a very narrow training, and so you might have a deeper level of knowledge over a less general or less broad set of skills. And so sometimes that's why we see a lower pass rate on that. And then the combined, again, it just depending upon the situation. It is challenging to set a standard of entry-level practice because of the multiple pathways. And so that's just always something that I've cautioned the dental board to keep in mind. But your pass rates are very consistent for what we would expect for this profession. Again, there is no set pass rate. It's possible you could have 100% pass rate, but then we would also question the validity of regulating this profession if 100% of people are passing the exam, because again, we know in reality not everybody passes, not everybody should be in a particular profession maybe that they have studied for. So that's the pathways. Another question that was asked by the council and the board was looking at the content area. And you can see the content area here is pretty stable in terms of the pass rate. I am going to, though, tell you what that content is, areas, because I realized it's not here in the memo. The content area number 1 is, is assessment and diagnostic records. So it's like, what you do, patient information and assessment, that early piece of it. Section 2 is dental procedures, and that's where we really get into the actual, functions, duties, the nitty gritty of the professions, the duties, and then I'm going down to 3 is infection control and health and safety. So you can see, interesting. This is where we have the lower pass rates. Infection control and health and safety. There's our consumer protection. Again, across all of them, but more so here. And then content area 4 is our law and ethics piece of it. And again, that seems to be the easier content area, which makes sense because it tends to be very straightforward, not as much subjectivity in our laws, knowing our laws. So OPS also did include some recommendations, which the board staff has been working on. And again, as Dr. Loren mentioned, is updating the candidate information bulletin. That's been done. We've added some new sample questions. The candidate information bulletin is mailed out to the applicants once they're eligible to test. It comes out, it gives them information about how to schedule the exam, as well as some helpful pointers for taking the exam. It's got some sample questions, things like that. That was just updated in May when the new exam plan went into effect. The exam plan, as we had talked about at prior council meetings, is very similar to the prior ones. The other recommendation here is to avoid the 70% or 75% minimum passing score, but to make sure that it reflects the actual entry-level difficulty of each form of the test. And that really benefits the applicants because we know that some questions may be easier, some may be harder over time, and we need to make sure that the passing score reflects that. And that regulatory package is moving forward, and David will report on that later. And then once that goes into play, we're going to have some conversations about reducing the number of questions, and we'll tackle that at some point. But again, this just letting you know that in addition to dealing with the access to care, we are also monitoring the RDA exam and making sure that it's fair, valid, and legally defensible. So with that, I will turn it back to Dr. Loren.
No, I also I appreciate and would like to thank Dr. Montes and the staff for continuing on working to access to care issues. I really didn't think we were going to be able to do this until after the sunset review. That's what I was told, but I'm really glad we were able to continue that. And I did notice that access to care during the sunset review was a very important issue for legislators. So thank you again. Do you have any questions?
Is there any council member discussion? I'd like to thank Dr. Loren and your subcommittee for taking on this task, and we will continue to, I believe, hear from you for updates. And the fifth question, I think, is a very important question to add to the survey, and also the OPS report is very thorough. And I am a little disappointed about the infection control and health and safety pass rate, that being the lowest. But I think that we're sort of on a good pathway for determining the goals that you have for your committee. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other committee discussion? Are there any public comments? Seeing that, thank you, Dr. Loren. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 9A, status update on pending regulations. I'm going to ask David Bergerman, legislative and regulatory specialist, to present this agenda item.
Thank you. This is David Brugman, and I'm going to be speaking about the dental assisting rulemaking packages that the board has that are in process but do not require any council or board input at this time. And there is one package related to dental assisting that fits that bill. Concerns dental assisting exams, as that Dr. Montes alluded to earlier. So the basics of this package would be to update the regulations to reflect changes in law and exam administration, including the fact that the clinical and practical examinations have been eliminated. And the board approved this rulemaking at the November 2023 meeting. The initial paperwork for this package has been developed, and at the time of the memo, since the time the memo was prepared, the package has been passed budget office approval and is now with the Department of Consumer Affairs for its approval. Its cabinet level agency, the the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency will also need to approve the package before it is initially filed with the Office of Administrative Law and the public comment period can start. But that's the extent of the regulations update at this time. I'm going to be speaking in separate agenda items about the working groups that are involved in other rulemaking packages. But that's the extent of my report for this agenda item.
Thank you. Is there any council member discussion? Are there any public comments? Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 9B, update on the progress of the board's infection control regulations advisory working group. I'm going to ask Mr. Bergerman to present this agenda item.
Thank you. Again, this is David Brugman. I'm the Legislative and Regulatory Specialist for the board. The board had previously approved language for updating the infection control regulations, but that was back in May of 2018. So it was decided to rescind the previously approved language and to appoint a two-person working group to facilitate updating that language for a new rulemaking that will be brought to the council and to the board for its input at a future date. The specific regulations that we're addressing here would be found in the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 1005. And we're obligated to review these guidelines on an annual basis, confer with our colleagues at the Dental Hygiene Board, and to establish a consensus for any updates. So the working group has met. We met on April 15th, and this was basically a strategy session to develop a plan for updating the guidelines, including consultations with subject matter experts and other committees, and other boards across the department as appropriate. The working group will meet again later this year, and we would have another update for you at the next Dental Assisting Council meeting to inform you of its progress at that point. That's the extent of my report. I welcome any questions that you might have.
Is there any council member discussion? Are there any public comments? Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 9C, update on the progress of the council's Dental Assisting Regulations Advisory Working Group. I'm going to ask Mr. Bergerman to present this agenda item.
Thank you. So back at the the November 2023 board council meeting, the council appointed a two-person working group to meet with staff to review proposed changes to the board's dental assisting regulations and develop updated language for future packages. One of those packages is the dental assisting exam package that I mentioned in a previous agenda item that has already been submitted. The board has already approved it. It's ideally will be filed with the Office of Administrative Law within the next few weeks. The working group, which consists of Chair Miyazaki and Vice Chair Fowler, has met with staff twice. Vice Chair Fowler met with staff on January 24th. This was a strategy session to basically outline an approach to the package, the dental assisting regulatory packages. And the basic notion at that time was to break it into large pieces based on the chapters within the dental assisting regulations, and at least to start to develop two separate packages. One of them is another agenda item for the council, and that is what's called a Section 100 rulemaking package. I'll get into the details about what a Section 100 package is at that agenda item, but this would be addressing repealing certain language within the existing regulations that is no longer in regulatory effect because of changes in statute. And the other package would be a package to update the board's regulations with respect to the applications for licensure. And this is Article 3 of the board's regulations. Currently, that's sections 1076 through 1079 in our regulations. And we're in the process of working on language for that to address, again, updates to the laws. For instance, we do not have regulations covering the orthodontic assistant or the dental sedation assistant permit applications. We want to get those set in regulation to provide additional clarity to licensees and the public about those requirements. The working group last met in April of 2024. We had reviews, and the intent there was to review language for both of these packages. At this time, the package for the applications for licensure, we believe, is not quite ready for council review. Once it is, we will have that placed on the agenda, and you'll have the opportunity to discuss it here at the council meeting and make your recommendations to the board. As I indicated, we are working on the section to advance the Section 100 package, and that is our next item on the agenda. Once we proceed with those packages, and once we accommodate the anticipated obligations of legislation that we'll be discussing later in the meeting, the intent of the working group is to approach the dental assisting regulations in broad stroke, these article chunks, that we would do a package for applications, a package for exams, a package for educational programs, a package for duties and settings, and approach it in that fashion. But that's the extent of my update on the working group's activities. Appreciate the opportunity to gain from their expert knowledge in crafting this material.
Thank you. Is there any council member discussion?
I'd like to make a comment. Tracy Montez again, just to summarize, there are 5 articles. One of the articles is already moving through the regulations. That's the exams. We have another article that we're going to ask the council to take action on today to move it forward to the board. That leaves 3 more articles, and as David mentioned, these 3 articles will be addressed as legislative changes are made through the sunset process. So again, in keeping with the board staff's commitment to work with the council in the dental assisting regulations, we are making progress on 2 of the 5. Thank you.
Is there any other council discussion? Are there any public comments?
Sherry Becker, representing Sherry Becker. Clarification. Those 2 sections, where are those to be viewed? And follow-up clarification moving forward with the other sections, those will be brought forward and then there'll be opportunity for input. Thank you.
So the previously approved package on the dental exam regulations, once that is gone through the approval processes and is published by the Office of Administrative Law, there'll be a 45-day public comment period that starts. It'll be noticed on the board's website. Licensees and members of the public will be notified by email and other methods of communication about the opportunity to comment. With respect to the packages that are moving forward, that we're continuing to work on, we don't have language for the applications package ready at this time for review by the council or the board. And once we do, there would be opportunities to comment both at those meetings and further on in the regulatory process as the public comment period for those packages becomes available. I apologize. There is probably another area of your question that I've forgotten.
I'm going to summarize real quick. So, Article 4, the examinations, right? I've got the correct article. Article 4 was already brought before the council and the board. So you have all commented on that. So you have seen it. However, as David mentioned, you will have additional opportunity as it moves through the final phases. And so that will all be posted. You'll get a listserv message and so forth. The second article, which is Article 1, is going to be discussed today. So you'll have a chance at council and at the board to comment. And then again, when it goes into the formal regulatory process, you'll get listservs to review it again. So you're going to see everything and have many opportunities to comment.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
I think it's also my understanding that the exam, the first one you're speaking about, the first of the articles, was that it was to remove the language that was no longer being happening, like the practical exam and for the practical exam for the RDA and the practical exam for the RDAEF. I think that was,
Yeah, the
and
main,
the rest
the main
of them,
focus of that package is to update the language to reflect both current law and current practice.
yes, thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay. Let's see. Where are we? Right here, right? Okay, is that right? Okay. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 9D, discussion and possible recommendation to the board to make non-substantive rule changes per section 100 of Title I of the California Code of Regulations, CCR, to repeat CCR Title 16, Section 1069 and its title, and amend CCR Title 16, Sections 1076 and 1086 concerning the Permit Reform Act. I'm going to ask Mr. Bergerman to present this agenda item.
Thank you. Section 1069 of our regulations concerns the requirements for minimum and maximum permit and license processing times related to RDA, RDAEF, RDH, RDHEF, and this is all in accordance with the Permit Reform Act of 1981, and that's found in sections 15375 and 15376 of the Government Code. So most of this package is focused on 1069. However, there are references to section 1069 in other parts of our regulations, specifically section 1076B and 1086D. And the idea here, it relates to the fact that the Permit Reform Act was repealed by AB 1757 over 20 years ago. And so these regulations no longer have the authority of statute because that statute itself has been repealed. And so the idea here is that we are going to essentially make a housekeeping measure here. And that we do that through what's called a Section 100 rulemaking process. And the package is going to address changes that have no regulatory effect. And they have no regulatory effect because this Permit Reform Act has been repealed. There's no authority for these regulations, so that we're removing them from the books. This package is also, and you'll want to go to, we explain this in a little more detail in our statement that starts on page 46 of the meeting materials, that we no longer have authority to regulate registered dental hygienists in any specific category. And so there are references in these sections which relate to the regulation of registered dental hygienists. We're also removing references to that regulation, those regulations, because again, we no longer have that authority by statute. And so these regulations currently have no effect, and the idea here is that the rulemaking process would remove this language, and there would be no changes in the regulations. But there is an established process under law called this Section 100 process. It takes less time than a standard rulemaking. I'm loath to put date certain on anything, but this would take less time than than the dental exams package. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we were able to complete this package and have it approved and finalized before the dental exams package had gone through the initial and final notice requirements and approval from the Office of Administrative Law. But that is the focus here for this rulemaking package. Again, no regulatory effect, but we have to make sure that we go through the proper administrative procedures to notice the public and let them know of these changes. And so that's the intent of the package. We have suggested motion language should the council wish to make a recommendation to the board about how to approach this rulemaking. So that's a summary of a slightly more involved process. So I'll just stop here and see if there's additional comments before we proceed.
Tara Welch, Board Counsel. Is Ms. Shields on the MS Teams? I'm wondering.
She will be here for the council portion of the meeting, but is not here at present.
Oh, for board meeting? Board meeting, you mean?
The board meeting, I apologize.
So I just want to make a note that the proposed revisions to 1086 on page 52 of the meeting materials, that this section likely will need to be amended at a later date to implement whatever changes are being made to the RDA and dental assisting statutes through the Sunset Review bill. So we'll likely see this section again, but right now we're just making some minor technical changes to it. But I want to note that on page 54, in the reference section, section 1754, and that section has also been repealed, so that will need to be updated to 1752.4. So if the council recommends the board approve this section 100, it should do so with this revision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any council member discussion? So what I'm understanding is that we have three actions that we could do. One is motion A to approve as is. Motion B would be to approve with the change recommended by legal on that one, to change that one section from 1754 to 1752.4. Or the third is to not make a recommendation. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve with the recommended changes. And do I have to repeat all that? Can I look at your notes?
Just for the record, that last part that you're recommending in the note, that 1754 will be changed to 1752.4.
Okay. So I'd like to approve with the recommended changes of changing section 1754 to 1752.4
In the note.
in the note.
Would anyone choose the second? Comment?
I apologize. I know that your regulatory counsel is pretty particular about the motions that get passed out on regulations, and so I'm just going to recommend that Council Member Fowler read the whole motion for motion B, because this is going to be a recommendation to the board with specific language as to what you're recommending that they adopt. So if you would, it's on page 45, motion B.
Okay, take two. This is Fowler. If I would like to move to recommend to the board that it consider and approve the proposed regulatory text as set forth in attachment 1, as amended with the following changes. I would like to change, look at yours again. Change 1754, Business Profession Code 1754 to 1752.4. Business Profession Code in the notes on the,
If I may, in the reference section of regulatory, or of CCR, section 1086, please continue. I can read the rest of it, just get it done for this motion, and authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to pursue the rulemaking through the Title I CCR Section 100 rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process, and to repeal CCR Title 16 Section 1069 and amend Sections 1076 and 1086 as described in the proposed text as amended at this meeting.
amen.
Pacheco, second.
Pacheco, second. Is there any member discussion? Are there any public comments? Seeing no public comments. Let's see. Thank you, board staff. Please call the roll and record votes for this agenda item.
This is Morella Turan. I will now call the roll. Epps Robbins,
Epps Robbins, yes.
Fowler,
Fowler, yes.
Miyazaki,
Miyazaki, yes.
Olagi,
Olagi, yes.
Pacheco.
Pacheco, aye.
The motion passed.
Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 10A, update regarding the board's 2024 Sunset Review. I'm going to ask Mr. Bergerman to present this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Miyazaki. So every few years, the boards and bureaus in the Department of Consumer Affairs undergo a sunset review process, in part because their authority expires at certain dates, which are specific to their statute. And the dental board has been going through this process since the last dental assistant council meeting. Our sunset review report was officially submitted to the Senate and Assembly committees that have oversight over the board. It's the Assembly Business and Professions Committee, the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. That was submitted in late December, and the hearing was held on March 12th of this year. President Felsenfeld and Dr. Montez appeared before the committees on behalf of the board. We've left links in our meeting materials. You can still access this hearing and view that at your discretion. The report is also available on our website. The committees have provided background a report in advance of the hearing, and the board was obligated to provide responses to the questions and issues raised in that background paper. Those responses were submitted on April 5th of this year. All of this has informed the board's sunset bill, which is SB 1453. We'll be discussing that a little bit later this morning. And currently that bill is located in the Senate Appropriations Committee. There is a hearing scheduled on the 16th, which is just after this meeting's concluded. And at that point, the bill would then go to the floor of the Senate for approval and then go through the legislative process in the Assembly. There would be a hearing before the Assembly Business and Professions Committee, as well as hearings before the Assembly Appropriations Committee before that bill is approved and signed by the governor. And that process would all conclude by the end of September. That is the last date the governor has to sign bills from this legislative session. So there will be opportunities to provide input into the sunset bill. We'll discuss that in just a few minutes, and help shape it as it proceeds into law. But that's the extent of my update on the sunset review process. I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you. Is there any council member discussion? Are there any public comments? I'm sorry, excuse me. Ms. Pacheco?
I was just going to commend Tracy Montez and Dr. Alan Felsenfeld in their presentation of the Sunset Review in front of the committee. If you haven't watched it, it was so professional, and so we should be very proud to have had that presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any council member discussion? Are there any public comments? Seeing there's no public comments, we will now move on to agenda item 10B, legislation of interest. I'm going to ask Mr. Bergerman to present this agenda item.
Thank you. Again, this is David Brugman with the board staff, and there are two specific bills that we had identified and been tracking related to dental assisting functions. As it happens, one of them has been folded into the other, so we were really effectively just discussing one bill. AB 2242 had been introduced, but it did not pass its policy committee by the set deadline, and so it is not advancing this year. But however, the language for that bill, which resembles AB 481 from last year, has been folded into the board's sunset bill, which is SB 1453. And the sunset bill does not, it goes beyond simply those dental assisting provisions. It includes all of the legislative proposals that the board has approved over the past several years, and it is more comprehensive than simply the dental assisting language, but that is a significant portion of the legislation. And Dr. Montez has prepared some material that addresses the provisions of the bill, and I'd like to defer to her at this point in terms of discussion of SB 1453.
Thank you, David. So we have additional meeting materials, and it's a table. It's titled Sunset Bill AB 1453, and there are copies on the counter at the back of the room. We will also have this posted at a later date. But my attempt here is to address a number of comments that have come in since the bill was published. And as David mentioned, AB 481 was a big effort by CDA working with our stakeholders and board staff to collaborate and to address a number of items that needed to be clarified or improved upon within our Practice Act. And so we greatly appreciate that collaboration. It then morphed into AB 2242. Yes, AB 2242, and then it went into our Sunset Bill. So it has gone through a number of transitions. Lots of individuals have taken a look at the language. The Business and Professions Committee was very accepting of looking at this language, including it in our Sunset Bill, as well as our 12 legislative proposals. We are very excited about that. Tomorrow, the board's going to look at another 5 legislative proposals that we are going to ask the Business and Professions Committee to also include in our Sunset Bill, if indeed those move forward by the board. So we have had just a great relationship with the Business and Professions Committee and appreciate their support. So having said that, in our board staff attempt to address all of the comments that have been coming in, we created this table here. And it doesn't necessarily include every comment that came in, but it includes those that we felt we could either address or timely because of the meeting and how the comments were coming in. So we're going to try to go through this matrix and focus on those significant points that the council would like to move forward to the board. The board's going to see this matrix and we'll look at it, but we really want to focus on where we see some extreme concerns that the council wants to make clear their position to the board. So certainly we will entertain feedback from our stakeholders, the public that are here. That's a very important part of the process, but a couple of caveats. One is we are not going to attempt to rewrite the Sunset Bill. That is not the purpose of our agenda item here today. If there are issues or concerns that you have that are not discussed, you are welcome to write a letter to the Business and Professions Committee as well as the board. The Executive Committee, we're going to ask the board to authorize the Executive Committee, which consists of the President and Vice President, to work with myself as well as our chair and co-chair of the council to address comments that may come in at a later date or comments that we can't address here today. So again, we're going to do our best to collaborate and hear and listen, but we're also going to be respectful of time as well as the work that was done in advance. But again, we know as we go through this matrix, there were typos. You know, there's some typos, just some things like that. So we appreciate everybody taking a look at it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. Well, I'm going to ask the chair if I can kind of go through this, if they're comfortable with this, and then I'm also going to have our legal counsel provide some guidance as I go through this in terms of how we want to address this. But I will start by saying the first two items on here are really more for the board, so I'm hoping we can kind of pass those two items on this matrix and go down right into 1750F. This was actually a board's legislative proposal. There was some concern that the wording was confusing. Board staff actually agreed with the wording and suggests that this possibly, again, go to the board just to clean that up. I'm going to ask board counsel, how do you suggest? Can we go through this line by line, or you think it's going to take us all day? Again, a lot of this, there's 9 pages, but there's a number of these things are typos.
For the sake of time and the fact that there are additional minor and technical revisions that need to be made to the Sunset Bill that are not reflected on this matrix, I think that if there are substantive concerns with the current provisions for dental assisting statutes, I think those need to be raised first, and then the council could potentially make a motion to recommend those substantive revisions to the bill for the board's consideration. And then when we get to the board agenda item, the executive officer will be recommending that the board include the chair, the DAC chair, assistance with revising the bill and communicating with the legislature going forward, so we can streamline the process and make sure that the dental assisting concerns and the voice is included in the process. So if there are substantive issues, let's go ahead and bring those up and include them in a motion, and the rest of the typos and anything that doesn't otherwise reflect the board staff's efforts on 481, we can work behind the scenes and make sure that those are corrected and properly reflected in the Sunset Bill.
So would you like me to point those out based upon the comments, or let our public and our council members just bring them? Okay, I'm going to start, and then those of you can add, because I know that there are 2 concerns that have come up, and let's start on page 3. One of the issues that came up was the, and I'm looking at 1750.2A, the one is struck, it's page 51 of our bill, and it has to do with the OAP applicants, work experience being removed. There was concern that the work experience requirement was removed for both the OA permit and the DSA permit. And so I would like some guidance from the council on how what recommendations they would like to make to the board. If they feel that that work experience needs to be included, or if it is something that can be removed. Again, this was something that was part of 481.
Are there any council member discussion?
Fowler, I believe that the 6 months work experience as a DA going into a DSA and an OA program, I think that is definitely beneficial. For them to just take the exam with no prior experience in the dental field, they're at a disadvantage. So I believe that should be put back in for the DA, that 6 month work experience for DAs applying to those programs.
Miyazaki, I agree with Fowler.
What about for RDA?
So it's my understanding, we're being asked whether we should include, if they're an RDA, that they do not need to have work experience, but they can apply for the OAP. And my understanding is when looking at the language, would that not make substantive changes to the wording of?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. I'm hearing that there's 6 month experience as a DA, but as an RDA, do you still feel that there should be work experience?
So as an RDA, right now, the way it was is that the RDA can go right into an OA or a DSA. At least with the RDA, there is the internship component of the RDA program where they have to work in a private practice doing general dentistry for so many hours. And so that gives them a little better leg up and more chance for success because they have some work experience.
And then how would you feel about the DSA? We'll tackle these two, and then you can go to public comment, and we'll move on to another one.
Miyazaki, I feel the same for the DSA, so RDA or 6 months of work experience. Is there any other discussion from any other members?
Epps Robbins, I do agree with the both of you. I do think that the work experience does help to expand their knowledge with the externship or the internship, whatever way that you want to determine it. But I do agree that that should be sufficient for the RDA, for the DSA, and for the also the other portion of that as well.
Any other members to discuss? Is there any public comment on this particular topic?
Sherry Becker, representing the Alliance, which consists of KDAT, the EFs, and CDAA. Question for clarification. So is this also changing the 12 months to 6 months? And the Alliance supports the 6 months for the work experience for the unlicensed DA for the OA and the DS also.
I would ask the council to clarify that because there are those two pieces.
Could you repeat that?
Sure. So, just clarifying because the current wording is 12 months and now we're talking about 6 months. So I think there's two things that we're marrying together with this concept here. And the Alliance does support retaining the 6-month work experience for the OA and the DS.
So Fowler, right now, the way it was, legislation, they had to have 6 months work experience before they can enter a program. And then, after the program, they have to have a total of 12 months work experience before they can take their exam. So ultimately, we're talking about 12 months work experience before they can take the OA exam. And I feel that, I think that is good, having that 12-month work experience. That really gives them time to connect the dots experience-wise as a DA before it makes them, I believe, a much better clinician and truly understand the, either the OA or the DSA.
Thank you.
And so this would basically leave things as is.
So it would retain also that 6-month work experience piece for the OA and the DS. Okay, thank you.
Lori Gallardi, I'm representing FADE. Just some clarification of where our current RDA students would fit in. Because they graduate from the RDA program, they may already be working via their internship in an ortho office, and then they want to take the ortho permit, but they're not a current RDA. So they either have to go and get their RDA first, and then they kind of fast track to becoming an OA, or if they choose to just stay as and want to be an OA, they can take the OA program, but then they'd have to work an additional 1 year. Just some clarification for where a student would fit in that's not an RDA yet, but finished an RDA program and has completed an OA permit program as well upon completion of their RDA program.
And I would ask staff who are hopefully on the line, Ms. Valerie, to answer possibly that question, or Ms. Parks.
Miyazaki here. I'm going to jump in and I think the reasoning behind this is that if someone is an RDA program, that why would they not get their RDA and then be able to qualify for the RDA? So we would keep the language as is, and then they would qualify immediately to take the RDA and also for the OA. Is there any other public comments?
Good morning. Hello, Tuka Zokai, representing the California Dental Association. Just trying to clarify that we have prerequisites included, and they need to be done chairside. And there's, for the OAP course exam, dental assistants will be supported, and there's appropriate filtration out of the education and exam process that's currently written. Also, I think it's on page 45. There is 1752.4R, or sorry, letter R. It says there's a language already about satisfactory work experience. So there is that language already included about work experience.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments?
I believe we have some staff input. All right.
Hi, this is. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Apologies for the confusion.
This is Tina Mallory. Can you guys hear me?
We can, Tina, but we've already had it answered. So if you could just continue listening as questions come up. I heard that you're having some difficulty, so we'll make sure that our speakers talk loud so that you can hear those questions that come up. Okay, so let's move on to another one. I think we have, again, basically what we've heard the council say is for these, both the course and the permit, we need to keep things status quo. So then let's go into another one that has come up that I would like the council to specifically address. And then again, I will open it up to others. That's that. Redundant. No, that's going to stay the way. I mean, if you want to talk about it. A question that came up, I'm looking at page 5 of the table. If you look down at the very last example, the alternative DA program, there was some confusion over why we had 500 hours of didactic and then laboratory or 300 hours of clinical. The preceptorship, those hours were flip-flopped, and there was some comments that this could be confusing. And so the council may want to discuss their opinion, and then if CDA would like to comment on why these hours were chosen the way they were. So we've got the alternative DA program and the preceptorship, and those clinical hours and didactic hours are flip-flopped. So I don't know if the council has an opinion, if they should be the same, or any questions that they might have about that, and then whether or not they would like CDA to clarify.
Misaki, I'm just interested in the rationale for for the reasoning, and maybe it might be valuable to have the CDA be present to explain.
Hello, Tuka representing CDA. If you can clarify which hours you're referring to.
Yes, so I'm looking at page 57 of the bill. It's section 1752.1A4, 1752.1A5. It talks about the alternative DA program having at least 500 hours of didactic and laboratory coursework and at least 300 hours of clinical. The preceptorship in dental assisting at least 500 clinical hours and 300 didactic and laboratory. So they sort of flip-flop the hours, and they were thinking maybe it should be, for both of them, it should be 500 for whichever one is you feel deemed the most pertinent, and then 300 for the other.
Right. If that recommendation is being moved forward, we can discuss it after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and
All
see
right.
if there's the rationale.
Okay. So does the council want to, other than it seems confusing, does the council have an opinion on whether or not they should be the same for both of those pathways?
I would just like a little more information, an explanation of why the difference before I can actually come to a good comment.
And Yeah, okay, and we'll come back to that. No, thank you, we'll come back to that. So, let's come back to that one. Let's take another one, because this is going to require some discussion. This is something,
Can I make one comment
Sure.
on that? So this is a request to, about the alternative dental assisting pathway, and the apprenticeship pathways is lumped into that in the explanation of the definitions. And the apprenticeship pathway is only requiring 144 hours of laboratory, didactic and laboratory coursework and 2,000 hours of work experience. So these hours don't match, and it might be to the benefit of removing the apprenticeship pathway from that alternative pathway, because there's going to be confusion. And the apprenticeship pathway, I think the intent of the apprenticeship pathway is to go through the OJT work experience pathway with standalone classes. So then that way there won't be any confusion about apprenticeship preceptorship. Apprenticeship can be under the, not stated, but it just automatically is considered to be an apprenticeship, OJT pathway. Thank you.
okay, so we'll finish, we got it.
Okay, I have a rationale. So there was outreach by CDA to different directors of programs, and we wanted to have room for a variety of program formats. So that is why there are the 2 different hour pathways, because of the variety of programs available and how they approach hours differently. So there's more equitable access to program formats.
Lori Glardy, representing FADE. I believe the alternative was also to give credit for those in the ROP program or the adult ed that only had like 500 hours, and then the rest would be the clinical. The opposite being the preceptorship were those that were already in clinical, basically in OJT, right? And wanted to give them some emphasis of a lot more didactic and lab coursework in an educational institution, in addition to the standalones. So it would include maybe more on dental materials, chair-side assisting, but really prepare them as a dental assistant for the knowledge level they would not get in an office. So I think that's why that kind of came to the 300 hours, but more emphasis was they're already in the job, but let's give them some education, and I believe hygiene was very supportive of that too. It's like, let's get them more than just the standalones, more on medical emergencies, dental materials, everything else, where again the alternative was those adult ed programs that may only be 500, those high school programs, but then they would combine that with more work experience so that they would then be eligible to take the RDA and have the didactic as well as the clinical experience.
Great, that's very helpful, thank you. So does that help the council understand we're looking at a variety of programs, but also trying to allow applicants to pick the path that allows them to strengthen where they may have weak areas?
Any discussion from council members? I mean, I think in my opinion that if it is common practice for ROP and high school programs to be 500 hours of didactic and laboratory, that this is could be a solid proposal, although it is, just want to note that it is confusing when you have the 500, 300, the 300, 500. Is there any other discussion from the council members concerning that? In support or not in support?
It's also, I was going to say, it's also something, yes, it's going to go into law, but it can be reevaluated, down the road. I don't want to say 4 years, but it would be, potentially 4 years later. So if we see confusion or something, also we would rely on our programs and stuff to do outreach and educate on the different pathways.
Fowler, my concern is if it's this confusing to me to figure out what an alternate DA program is opposed to a preceptor and dental assisting program. The applicants, will it be clear to them of knowing which pathway and why the discrepancy? If I don't know if it's going to be, if they could really wordsmith it well so they know exactly what pathway I'm signing up for and the reason why, then I think that would be advantageous.
Any public comments?
Sherry Becker, representing the Alliance. I think if it's confusing to us, it's going to be confusing to other people, so I agree that the language would really have to be wordsmithed to be super clear. Thank you. Sherry Becker, representing Sherry Becker. I appreciate I think the concept of alternative qualifications for licensure and for different programs. However, I think sometimes less is more. So I personally feel that some additional programs with a preceptorship would be a confusing pathway as well. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Okay, I'm going to move on to section, it's the top of page 6, section 1752.1C. Okay, so this section here, we have several recommendations made by board staff, and we need the council to weigh in. So first of all, it's a very simple request on the current wording. It has board approved struck out on 1 and 2. We feel that that needs to be retained because those courses are approved by the board. And we think that, again, that was just an oversight by the editor outside of the board. And then we recommend that we add a Pitt and Fisher sealants course that should be included in the list here. And then finally, and this is again very significant where we'd like the board or the council to weigh in for the board, is to address the 5 years, because it's a bit confusing throughout the bill in terms of when courses should be taken within the 5 years. We have heard from stakeholders that it is not necessary to take a radiation safety course every 5 years or to ensure that you have taken it within 5 years of application, because the technology does not change that significant in a 5-year period. However, things like infection control are important to have a current infection control course. And so I think we're safe in assuming that the first comment that the board has recommended is good. We need to keep board approved in there, but I would like the council and then of course the public to offer opinions, recommendations regarding adding Pitt and Fisher sealants on that list, and then which courses should be taken within 5 years of application. Thank you.
Any committee comments, discussion?
Fowler here. I believe I agree with Tracy there that the infection control is the one that needs to change. So DAs that are applying for an RDA license, it should be within 5 years, that in fact 8-hour infection control course.
Miyazaki, I believe that it's confusing for the applicants who've taken sealants or someone who's taken sealant and isn't a RDA and the confusion about whether they can do sealants or not, it would be, I think, much more fluid if we required the sealants upon the application of their RDA. Is there any just further discussion?
Pacheco, I agree.
So the recommendation is to add sealants upon the, upon application for the RDA. Okay. And then is there a discussion about requiring the board-approved course in radiation safety and coronal polishing in the, taken within 5 years of the application?
Fowler here. I don't believe the radiation safety and the corona polishing need to have that same time requirement as the infection control.
Pacheco, I agree.
So it's the, sort of an agreement that the board-approved course in radiation and coronal polishing does not have to be taken within 5 years of application.
So DPA, infection control, and Pitt and Fisher should be all within 5 years? Is that what I'm hearing? DPA.
So to be clear, what this could look like is someone took a radiation safety course 25 years ago to perform radiation services as a DA. And now they're applying for an RDA license, and it's okay. You don't think that the technology may have been updated such that the RDA applicant would need to be more familiar with radiation processes, so to have the course taken within 5 years of application.
Good clarification. Perhaps it needs to be taken within 10 years, 8 years, 15. How does it change the technology?
Oh.
Yeah, I do want to make a comment. I think it's very important to have a time manner on this. It should be within a time frame of 5 years, although we don't think that things change as far as radiation and other items. Programs do change, and equipment does change. So it would be more beneficial to have a smaller time frame for the applicant to be able to achieve the requirements of what we've listed, the DPA, the ICE, the radiation, the radiology, so that they are more vast and aware of the currency of what's out there. You find a lot of times within offices, facilities, they're being trained on older equipment if they're getting on-the-job training. And then if they move offices and that office is more updated or is more inundated with the currency of what's out there, they're going to lose that benefit. So if we close down that time frame and not allow a vast variation of 8 years, 10 years, and we solidify it with a 5-year time frame, or even retract that even back and have them have to have certain requirements prior to taking their RDA, I think this will be implemented to allow them to have the ability to know what the programs have, see what's out there when they get on the job training, not need as much on the job training from other assistants that may not have that time. So again, we have to keep in consideration who's updating their offices, what office is that auxiliary going to go into, and if they're allowed to let that time frame expand, I think that it's not going to be beneficial to them. They're going to lose important information that they would need to facilitate their job duties. And I think this will eliminate them having to go out to get additional training after retaining a job, or not getting that support from a on-the-job training site. So.
Pacheco, couple of thoughts. The physics of radiation have not changed much. However, the equipment has changed, so I agree with Ms. Welsh, and that maybe a 10-year recency on radiation safety may be considered.
At this point, we'd like to invite public comments.
Melody Randolph representing the Alliance. For X-ray, it doesn't make sense to us to have to retake an X-ray class and a recency, because as a DA, you can legally take X-rays, and assuming that this person will have been taking X-rays all of this time, different than sealants, for example, where they can't be doing sealants. They might have taken a class 10 years ago in sealants, and they cannot have been doing it for those 10 years. Then, of course, they need to take another class in order to brush up their knowledge and skills. But for X-ray, they're going to have been taking X-rays all this time. For them to have to take another X-ray course, when in that course it's not guaranteed that in that course they're going to be teaching, you know, exactly what the student is going to be using, the type of equipment and whatnot the student's going to be using. That doesn't make sense to have to take an X-ray class again when they've been taking X-rays for 10 years. Thank you.
Lori Gallardi representing FADE. I concur with the previous speaker as well. These are working DAs that probably already have their RDA or their X-ray certification. They're already taking their X-rays. I have more concerns, though, to be honest, with the 2-hour in the Dental Practice Act and the 8-hour infection control being a 5-year window that we as licensees have to update every 2 years. So again, in the Corona Polish, if they took that as a student or took a course, they're not going to be able to do Corona Polish until they're an RDA, or depending on how this bill goes through, they may have their Corona Polish. But either way, you know, I think the infection control and the DPA need to be recent. That should be 2 years. And then as far as the X-ray, if they're practicing DA taking their X-ray certification, they've already taken it. I don't see the need to update that. We don't update our licensees. So anyway, a little bit of work that needs to be done on that, I think. Thank you.
Sherry Becker, I agree.
Does the council come to an opinion on how they would like to recommend this particular subject to the board?
I don't know if we're in agreement with
If I can summarize, I think the gist of the, from the information from all of us discussing and the public comments is that the radiation safety actually does not need to be have like a time limitation, because if they're practicing DA, they already have their X-ray license and they won't need to take another course. For the Dental Practice Act, the 8-hour infection control, from the last comment, it seems to make sense that since we have a 2-hour renewal window as licensees, that should be within a 2-year time window, and that the coronal polishing and the sealants should be included in the application, and the coronal polishing and the sealants can be taken in a 5-year window. Is anyone in agreement with that or disagree?
I agree.
Can you repeat that? Sorry. One more time. So what would the council recommend is 2 years DPA infection control?
Yes, 2 years DPA and infection control, no time limitation on the radiation safety, add sealants to the requirement as a RDA for RDA licensure application, and sealants and coronal polishing would be within the last 5 years.
May I just make a note that with respect to the radiation safety, we're presuming that the applicants are currently using X-ray machines and equipment, and that presumption may not be correct. So if somebody took this radiation safety course 25 years ago, and they have not been practicing or utilizing radiation equipment recently, we may need to write in, either radiation safety course within 5 years or demonstration of recent X-ray experience on patients. I mean, we need to ensure consumer protection, and we cannot just presume that someone's been, utilizing radiation equipment on patients. I'm just throwing that out there for your consideration.
Yes, and thank you. And we're thinking about public safety and also barriers to licensure. I think that's the two that we're kind of going back and forth on. And public safety is more important. Maybe we can consider a 5 to 10 year.
I think 8 years was discussed in a previous comment. Is everyone comfortable with that recommendation to take to the board for further discussion?
My recommendation
8
would still
years.
be 10. I'm sorry.
Other council members have an opinion on the number of hours? Years, excuse me. I mean, I think just for the consistency's sake, I do think 8 is a good number. We're kind of working in 5s and 10s. Oh, actually, we're doing 2 as well. So,
As an educator, things do not move that quickly. And so that was my rationale for 10 years. And I agree with Ms. Welsh. You can't guarantee that the DAs are out there working with current equipment. So that was my rationale for the 10-year period.
okay, so we're in agreement that there should be a time limit instead of no time limit. And now we're discussing whether it should be 8 to 10 years, 8 or 10 years.
And you could just leave it open for the board as well. You could say, we're recommending a time limit, 8 to 10. We're going to defer to the board if the council can't come into agreement.
All right, public comment?
Melody, representing the Alliance. The key here is making sure, public safety, we understand, and making sure that they are skilled and able to do this, and a time limit, 10 years, whatever it is, isn't ensuring that. What about suggestion, putting into regulation the ability for the applicant to challenge out somehow, like they would have to give the providers of the X-ray courses the ability to allow somebody who has previously had an X-ray license to challenge by proving, allow them to take 1 or 2 sets of X-rays, whatever, so they don't have to take the entire course again. If they can prove that they can take a set of X-rays safely, that would accomplish this goal. And that could be done in regulation. It wouldn't have to be done in statute.
Well, I think it sounds like a great idea. I think implementation-wise, at the staff board level, with board staff, that would be very hard. That's going to be very costly to do. So that's my opinion.
Also, we can't just start creating exemptions from the statutes in regulation. Like the statute itself has to provide for the exemption. So we can't, just start carving out course requirements or who doesn't have to take those in a regulation, which will, also takes a lot of time. Our goal, especially with working on 481 and the ITR language, we're trying to streamline the process to get people out there working, get them trained and skilled quicker. So if we have to rely on regulations, to implement new policies, it takes longer to get, people properly licensed and through the process. So if an exemption needs to be had so that an individual, there's no limitation on the radiation certificate, there should at least be an either a radiation certificate within X number of years or a radiation certificate and proof of recent experience performing X-rays on patients, something like that. I mean, it would have to be in the statute itself, providing that either or situation, the exemption.
Okay, we have time for one more comment from the executive officer, and there are 2 comments that are present right now, public comments.
Sherry Becker, I don't know who I'm representing, maybe the Alliance right now, that sounds good. An idea is, so we have our formal education, and then we have our alternative programs coming in with work experience. So there has to be documentation on work experience. So just a suggestion maybe would be, as part of that work experience documentation for them to show, I'm pretending I've been a DA for 25 years and I took my radiology safety 25 years ago. Now I'm sitting for my board as an RDA. I have to show that work experience. Maybe part of that documentation could include recency of taking safe x-rays. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori Gallardi representing FADE. We don't currently have any limitation on the X-ray being current or have been taken within however many years. So that's never been a concern, not that it shouldn't be. My other is that I wouldn't want to discourage a current DA that took our X-ray years ago, maybe beyond that point, not to want to take their RDA because they don't want to go back and take a 40-hour course. So I think that, you know, the office would know, and if it was a student that graduated 10 years ago, then, you know, that would be something else to think about. But I would hope we wouldn't discourage somebody because of this time limit to not become an RDA because of that.
Thank you. Thank you for all your comments, and we are listening to your comments and understand. However, we understand also that there are limitations to some of this that we're discussing. So for the board report, I will report that the radiation should be taken within 8 to 10 years, and with the understanding about and extenuating the concerns of the stakeholders.
Okay, great, thank you. Now the last one that I would like to discuss, and then I'll open it up to our council if they have some other areas. It is on page 8, and that is 1752.4E. It's page 63 of the Sunset Bill. There was concern that OA duties were being added into the RDA. And so there were 2 areas here. And again, this was, my understanding was negotiated with AB 481. And so we'd like to get some feedback on that.
Are there any comments from the Dental Assisting Council members? So some of my concerns about this is that the language is different when we're talking about the language that has to go with the page 63, etch bond. So in the OAP on page 53 talks about isolating, etch, bond, and attach, etch and bond, and the word isolate is missing in front of etch on number 1, and I would like to include that information in there. And then in reading this information, it sounds like that the RDA can etch, bond, and attach, but on page 53, the OAP can only isolate, etch, and prepare. So I'm confused why the RDA can actually do more by attaching than the OAP. And it seems to me that the OAP would be able to attach as well, and this as well as the RDA, or maybe the intention was for the OAP to isolate, etch, prepare, and attach, and then for the RDA to do everything but attach. So I'm confused because in the language that reads now, the RDA can actually attach and the OAP can only get to preparation.
So it sounds like, again, this is where there were some editorial things that need to be cleaned up, and I'm certainly happy to add that and make sure it's clarified. I just want to make sure the council is ensuring that we're consistent in moving forward with that language change. And if this public has any questions.
So in clarification for the council, if we want to make any comments about that right now, or is that whether you agree that the OAP and the RDA can, are limited in any of the aspects of attaching the provisional attachments? Would you want the OAP to be able to attach and not RDA not attach, or would you want the RDA and the OAP to be able to do everything and attach it?
Fowler here. I believe what they're addressing is they want to allow the RDA to be able to do composite buttons or attachments for Invisalign, not necessarily, but although they didn't state it, brackets that the OAP can do. They can place the brackets for bonding. So they're trying to allow the RDA to be able to do more, I think, in lines when it comes to orthodontic duties, like for Invisalign. That's what those buttons and attachments, I believe, is what they're referencing to. And then the adding on of the size, fit, secure, and remove ortho bands, so just giving them additional OAP duties, the RDA.
Are there any public comments?
Melody Randolph with the Alliance. I agree with Kara's initial assessment of, I think it's flopped, and in the language on page 53 for the OAP, that they can just prepare teeth would be very confusing, because that's how I read it. They can only prepare the teeth, but they can't attach the brackets, but they can currently attach brackets. That's their whole job description. And to put that in for the RDA, etch, bond, and attach composite buttons or attachments, I agree with Jerry's statement that originally what was intended was to allow an RDA to attach buttons, but not for Invisalign or that type of treatment, but not brackets. Although people would interpret this as it's written, buttons or attachments. Well, attachments would be any attachment, which would be including a bracket. So essentially, you'd be getting rid of the OAP permit category, which we would be adamantly opposed to.
So it sounds, well, go ahead.
So there used to be language about brackets, but that was excluded to be specific that this is only for buttons. So it isn't designed in a way to increase the scope to an OAP. It is still less than that. And when meeting with the different educators, they were very comfortable and confident about including the buttons.
For the RDA?
For the RDA, but not brackets. So we removed the word brackets is not included.
So it sounds like attachments needs to be taken out of 1752.4E. So it should be etch, bond, and attach composite buttons for orthodontic procedures.
Right, and I think part of that was when we were meeting with different groups that we said, well, is buttons the most appropriate term? So then we changed buttons to attachments to try to make it more, universal. But now I see how that could be misinterpreted as including brackets. We can include, send some recommended language for excluding brackets, for example. So trying to have the appropriate language for the right scope.
And then for the OAP, should the language prepare and attach? Because it doesn't specifically say that they're attaching the brackets.
For OAP?
Yeah, it's like page 53.
Right. And so that's something that can be recommended.
Okay, so.
For OAP.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. And on page 62, line 19, it says for the RDA duty, 62, line 19, it says remove, so page 62, line 19, it says for the RDA duty, remove orthodontic bands. And then there's redundancy on page 63, line 13, it says size, fit, secure, and remove orthodontic bands. So I think that just needs to be looked at where the remove should actually be located at, whether it's direct or indirect or general supervision, because I think one is under general supervision, general or direct supervision, and the other one says specifically direct supervision.
Okay, so that concludes the areas that I flagged as needing some guidance from the council. Most of the other areas, I am going to assume that they're non-substantive, changes can be addressed by the board. However, I will now turn it over to the council and the stakeholders to comment on maybe other areas. Again, reminding everybody we're not rewriting the sunset bill. Thank you.
Are there any discussion points from the council members? I think the only discussion point I just want to reiterate was the part about the apprenticeship pathway, and so it's not confused with preceptorship, and that could be taken out alternative pathways, because that's probably considered under the OJT. Are there any public comments?
Melody, representing the Alliance. We're talking in general of you're asking about anything on this table, right, Dr. Montez?
Yes, or anything that is not on the table that we did not include due to time constraints. And again, just reminding everybody too that if we don't talk about it today, you can still submit comments.
Okay. I think one issue that really needs to be clarified and that the council needs to talk about is the qualifications for a hygienist to become an RDA. So on page 7, the large section there, 1752.1, to clarify how a hygienist can become an RDA, whether or not they need to have the same qualifications, meaning they have to have had 15 months work experience as a dental assistant, or graduate from an RDA approved program and take the RDA exam. The way it reads now is confusing. I read it as they have to take the RDA exam, but they don't necessarily have to have the same qualifications. They don't have to have the 15 months work experience as a dental assistant. And just by being a hygienist doesn't mean you can do the duties of a dental assistant. So they should have to have the same qualifications as an RDA.
So I just would like to add to that. So current law is that if an individual has an RDH license, they do not need to do any additional work other than taking the exam. The intent of this is to clarify that they must take the RDA combined written and law and ethics exam. So currently law has been that there are no additional requirements that must happen.
I would just reserve the right to review the legislative proposals that were included in the board's sunset review report, because I've noticed that there were several legislative proposals submitted by the board that were changed in the sunset bill, which don't make any sense. So to the extent that the hygienist qualification for RDA application disagrees with the legislative proposal that the board approved and included in the sunset review report, we would take a look at amending the bill for consistency with the board's recommendation. because some of this stuff we've already had lengthy conversations about. And so if, SB 1453 is missing the stuff that the board already talked about and the council deliberated on for many meetings, we want to make sure that the legislative proposals the board submitted are accurately reflected in the Sunset Review bill. So, we'll take a look at the hygienist issue and make sure that it comports with the legislative proposal submitted by the board. Otherwise, we have very limited time to get amendments into the bill, and I just also want to note that all of the stakeholder groups have the ability to communicate with the legislative staff and the author of the bill, because this is not the board's bill. This is the board's sunset bill. So the board is participating on this legislation, but it doesn't control it. So if there are other things that stakeholders want that the board is not ready or is not ready to do through the sunset review process, you have that option to talk directly with the legislature.
Thank you. So it's my understanding that because it's the law that already is it's already the law that they can actually become an RDA without having any other education requirements, that's going to be a battle for the future. That could be something that could be changed in the future.
Correct. It's something that, again, if the stakeholders have concerns, as Tara said, they can approach the Business and Professions Committee, but this isn't something that we want to go into great length of discussion here, because that would be something that's very substantive. It's not consistent with the legislative proposal that the board has approved, and that is, again, clarifying that applicants must take the RDA combined written law and ethics examination.
Are there any public comments? All right. Great. All right, if I may make a motion for the council. So for section 1750.2A on.
Actually, that you don't have to do because I'm already in there.
Okay, there.
I would just go to the one where you're recommending changes.
Okay, let's see. There's no priority permits.
The one that I really thought was this one here. And this one. That's my thought. On these, where they're not taking any action, they're just leaving it as is, we don't really need to do anything, do we? Or do you want them to have? I don't think we need to go line by line. I think that. Right, just where they have specific changes, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
just do these two.
Could I get before I make the motion, I'll rescind what I stated. Could I get, obtain an opinion from the Dental Assisting Council about the hours, where there's the 300 to 500 hours, or the 500 to 300 hours for the didactic laboratory versus the work experience? Is there any opinion of one way or another, or to keep it as is, or to keep it the same?
As an educator, it would depend on what the content is for each section that they have listed. So if that's what they have figured out to cover the same content, then the hours is really mute. It is what they've listed. And then you would have to go back and look at the content to figure out what they put in each section. Because there's the didactic, preclinical, and clinical. Mm-hmm. And so however they have put that package together is how they're going to spit out the hours. Spit out, don't you love it?
That was effective. Fowler, I agree, but what I really would like is it to be very descriptive when these come, so an applicant knows exactly which pathway is the best fit for them. It's got to be very descriptive on the board website when you get there.
And so that would come in regulation to describe that.
So that would mean that we don't need to make a comment on that because that would stay the same. Okay. Okay, so for the item concerning the application for the RDA, we come to a agreement that we will add sealants for upon application for the RDA. Radiation safety should be taken within 8 to 10 years. Sealants and coronal polishing should be taken within the last 5 years. Infection control and DPA should be taken within the last 2 years.
And keep the board approved on 1 and 2 that was struck out.
Okay. Okay. And then the other item is for the RDA and the OAP, whether who can attach the brackets that the RDA could not attach to brackets and the OAP can attach to brackets, and to remove the language of attachments from the RDA item about attaching the Invisalign buttons. So now do you want me to clarify that, make that into one motion? Allowing time.
Oh, yeah, you got it. There you go. You got it.
Okay. Yours is about it. Okay. All right, so now I should say one motion.
That's your motion, and then ask for a second.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Fowler.
Okay. Discussion, council members?
I know that you have the 8 hours for the radiation safety, 8 to 10. I would like to propose that you stretch that to 10. I just feel like with the radiation safety courses, they're difficult. They're not located in every part of California. And I would hate to see a barrier in place for those that are moving forward to become an RDA. That you may want to consider that.
Any other opinion from the council members?
I would like to also offer that it's been brought to my attention that these are extremely expensive courses, and so we're trying to balance public safety with access to care.
Would it be positive with the council if I present it as 8 to 10 years with the comments concerning the expense of the programs versus the access to the courses as well?
I guess my question is, what difference does the 2 years make?
Pardon me?
What difference does the 2 years make, 8 to 10? If radiation safety changes move at such a slow pace where, we're still working with film and yet everything is digital, is 2 years really going to matter if we just go with the 10 years?
Does the council have an opinion, whether it's 8 or 10 years?
Fowler, I believe 10 years would be fine for radiation.
I'm in agreement, Miyazaki. So I will amend my motion to say that the radiation, instead of being within 8 to 10 years, the radiation should be taken within 10 years. Is there a second? And then we'll have public comments.
Pacheco, second.
Miyazaki motion and Pacheco second. Public comments?
Dr. Lori Gallardi.
So you had a motion, and it was seconded by Councilmember Fowler. You changed your motion, and at this point, it would be up to Councilmember Fowler to agree to change her second on the motion.
No, so on the last, I will rescind my second when we were talking 8 to 10, and I'd like to agree with the 10-year.
Right, so you agree with the amendments to the motion? Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Pacheco, you're out.
Thank you, thank you. Public comments?
Dr. Lori Gallardi, representing Fade. I just wanted to clarify, did you say a board-approved Dental Practice Act? Because if that's the case, the current programs, your RDA programs, don't have a board-approved DPA because that's the CEU department. They just have to include the Dental Practice Act. But my understanding is most of those courses do not have not gone through the CEU department to get the board-approved Dental Practice Act. It's incorporated within their program. So I just want to clarify that that should not be the board-approved one, or if it is the board-approved one.
The programs are approved though, correct? Yes. So we will monitor that. Let's leave it there now, but we can pull it out if it's a problem. But I think, again, it's assumed because the program is approved, this is an approved course.
It's being struck from in the bill. They're striking board approved, and that's the concern, that they're no longer requiring board approved.
No, it is. We want it to keep. That was part of the motion. Yes, we're returning it.
And the same with the IC?
Yes. Yes.
Any further public comments? Thank you, board staff. Please call the roll and record votes for this agenda item.
This is Morella Turan. I will now call the roll. Epps Robbins,
Epps Robbins, agree.
Fowler,
Fowler, yes.
Miyazaki,
Miyazaki, aye.
Olagi,
Olagi, yes.
Pacheco.
Pacheco, aye.
The motion passed.
Thank you, and thank you all for participating in sort of a difficult topic and in such a short amount of time. And we would now like to move on to agenda item number 11, adjournment. This concludes the May 14, 2024 Dental Assisting Council meeting. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.